Welcome to the Boy in a Scanner channel. Are you confused by police radio codes? We've all been there. Stuck in traffic, bored. You turn on the radio, but instead of music, you hear something else, crackling static. Then a voice. 10-4, dispatch. Possible 1031 at Main and Elm. Code 3. What does any of that even mean? It sounds important, maybe even a little bit cool, like you're getting a secret glimpse into a hidden world. For decades, police radio chatter has been a mystery to most of us, a secret language only understood by those on the inside. But this coded language, once essential for police work, is slowly disappearing, replaced by something far more radical, plain English. It might not sound as exciting, but this shift to plain language is about more than just ditching the jargon. It's about saving lives, because when lives are on the line, clarity is crucial. And using a code that not everyone understands, well, that can be a matter of life and death. Imagine a time before cell phones, before the internet, even before reliable telephone service. For police officers in the early 20th century, communication was a nightmare. Foot patrols were isolated, car chases were chaotic. Coordination was almost impossible. Then, radio came along. Suddenly, officers could talk to each other across distances. They could coordinate responses. It was a revolution.
But this new technology came with a catch. Everyone could listen in. Criminals could monitor police frequencies. Civilians could overhear sensitive information. The solution? Codes. A way to keep communications secret, to maintain an element of surprise.
The first codes were simple, often just abbreviations or slang. But as radio technology evolved, so did the codes. They became more complex, more standardized, and they formed the bedrock of police communication for generations to come. This isn't just some dry history lesson, folks. This is about understanding how we got to where we are today. How a system designed for speed and secrecy ended up creating confusion and chaos. And why, in the age of instant information, sometimes the simplest solution is the best. Buckle up, because we're about to crack the code on police radio communication. And trust me, it's a lot more interesting than it sounds. The early days of police radio were like a scene out of a gangster film. Picture this. The year is 1930. Prohibition is in full swing. Criminals are running rampant. And the cops, they're trying to catch them with little more than a badge and a prayer. But then, a game changer arrives. Two-way radios in police cars. Suddenly, cops could communicate with each other on the move. No more relying on phone boxes or carrier pigeons. They could coordinate chases, share information, and respond to crimes in real time. In the heat of the moment, every second counts. Early police radio communication was anything but concise. Imagine relaying complex situations with long sentences. They needed a way to shorten transmissions, to convey critical information quickly and efficiently, and keep conversations private from prying ears. This is where codes came in. Using prearranged words, they communicated complex info fast. As radio communication became more widespread, a patchwork of codes emerged across the country. Different police departments developed their own systems, often borrowing from each other or adapting existing codes to fit their needs. It was a bit like a game of telephone, with codes evolving and changing as they spread from one department to another. This lack of standardization created a major headache. Imagine officers from different jurisdictions responding to a major incident. They're trying to coordinate their efforts, but they're speaking different languages. What one department called a 10-4, meaning message received, another might call a code 4. It was a recipe for confusion and miscommunication. The need for a more unified system was becoming increasingly clear. The push for standardization gained momentum in the 1930s. The International Association of Chiefs of Police, IACP, recognized the need for a common language and began working on a set of standardized codes. They wanted a system that was concise, easy to remember, and adaptable to different situations. One of the key challenges was finding a balance between brevity and clarity. This led to the development of codes that used a combination of numbers and brief phrases. By the mid-20th century, standardized codes had become an integral part of police radio communication. Officers were trained to use them from day one. Codebooks became essential reference guides. And the airwaves were filled with a symphony of numbers and cryptic phrases. This era marked the height of coded communication in law enforcement. Officers took pride in their ability to decipher the secret language of the streets. The codes provided a sense of camaraderie, a shared understanding among those who wore the badge. But beneath the surface, cracks were beginning to show. The very codes designed for clarity and efficiency were starting to create new problems. Our story takes us to the heartland of America. The year is 1937. The place? Illinois. Specifically, the Illinois State Police. They were facing a problem. Radio interference was rampant, making communication a nightmare. Long descriptive messages only added to the chaos. They needed a solution, a way to cut through the static. Enter the 10 codes. This wasn't just some random inspiration. The 10 codes were designed for efficiency. Each code represented a specific phrase or situation. 10-4 for message received, 10-20 for location, 10-33 for emergency. All units respond. Short, sweet, and to the point. Perfect for battling bad guys and bad reception. The brainchild of Illinois State Police Communications Director Charles Hopper, the 10 codes were a game changer. They streamlined communication, reduced airtime, and, at least in theory, made it harder for outsiders to understand what the heck the cops were talking about. Word of the 10 codes spread like wildfire, first across neighboring states, then throughout the country. By the 1950s, the 10 code system had become the gold standard for police communication in America. From bustling cities to sleepy towns, officers were using the same codes. The 10 codes weren't just for cops anymore. They seeped into popular culture. Movies and TV shows embraced the lingo. 10-4, good buddy became a catchphrase. The codes added a layer of authenticity to police procedurals, even if they sometimes exaggerated their use. This cultural penetration had an unexpected side effect. It made the public feel like they were in the know. Even if they didn't understand all the codes, they recognized the rhythm, the cadence of police radio chatter. It created a sense of familiarity, a shared language between law enforcement and the communities they served. The widespread adoption of the 10 codes transformed police work. Dispatchers could relay information quickly and efficiently. Officers on patrol could understand each other, even if they were from different departments. It was a system built for speed and clarity, essential in emergency situations. The 10 codes weren't limited to basic communication. They evolved to encompass a wide range of situations. From traffic stops to burglaries to hostage situations, there was a code for everything. The system became incredibly detailed, with some departments developing their own variations and additions. This standardization and adaptability made the 10 codes an invaluable tool for law enforcement. But as with any system, there were unintended consequences, cracks in the facade of efficiency that would eventually lead to its downfall. The 10 codes were, at their core, a triumph of efficiency. In the days of limited radio frequencies and clunky equipment, brevity was paramount. Every second of airtime was precious. And the 10 codes delivered. Instead of saying, "We are responding to a report of a robbery in progress at the First National Bank," officers could simply say, "1031 at the First National." This efficiency wasn't just about saving time. It was about ensuring that vital information got through, even in challenging conditions. Imagine a high-speed chase, with officers weaving through traffic, trying to coordinate their movements. Long, descriptive messages could get lost in the chaos. but a few well-placed 10 codes could convey the same information in a fraction of the time. This speed and clarity were crucial in emergency situations. When lives were on the line, every second mattered, and the 10 codes allowed officers to communicate quickly, coordinate effectively, and hopefully, resolve situations with minimal loss of life. The 10 codes weren't just about efficiency. They also provided a sense of security, a belief that police communications were shielded from prying ears. After all, if the public didn't understand the codes, then surely criminals wouldn't either, right? This assumption, however, proved to be flawed. As the 10 codes became more widespread, so did knowledge of them. Criminals, always resourceful, got their hands on code books. They listened to police scanners. They learned the lingo. The codes, once a secret language, were no longer impenetrable. This realization was a wake-up call for law enforcement. The 10 codes, once seen as a shield against criminal activity, were now potentially providing them with valuable information. It exposed a fundamental flaw in the system, the illusion of security. While the 10 codes brought a level of standardization to police communication, they also created a new set of problems. The very nature of the system, with its reliance on codes and abbreviations, left room for misinterpretation. What one department considered a 1018, another might call a 1033. This lack of universal standardization became glaringly apparent during large-scale incidents or multi-agency responses. Imagine a natural disaster with police, fire, and EMS all trying to coordinate their efforts. But they're speaking different dialects of the same language, their 10 codes not always aligning. These inconsistencies could have serious consequences. Delays in response times, misunderstood instructions, even friendly fire incidents. The 10 codes, designed to bring clarity, were, in some cases, doing the opposite. And as the demands on law enforcement grew more complex, the cracks in the code became impossible to ignore. The success of the 10 codes ironically spawned a monster. If a little bit of code was good, then more must be better, right? Wrong. Encouraged by the perceived efficiency of the 10 codes, police departments across the country went code crazy. Enter the 11 codes, the signal codes, the phonetic alphabets, each designed to address a specific aspect of police work, from describing suspect vehicles to communicating tactical maneuvers. The problem? This wasn't just building on the 10 code foundation. This was creating a whole new Tower of Babel. Officers, already juggling the complexities of the job, now had to memorize a dizzying array of codes. And these weren't universal. What one department called a Signal 10, meaning urgent, another might use for something entirely different. This wasn't communication. This was a recipe for disaster.
North and South medley, played by the United States Marine Pipe and Drum Corps. It is
The beauty of language lies in its diversity. The problem with police codes, their diversity was a nightmare. While the 10 codes provided a basic framework, each region, each department, even individual officers, developed their own variations and interpretations. Imagine a California Highway Patrol officer trying to coordinate a pursuit with a sheriff's deputy from rural Montana, both using 10 codes, but with subtle yet crucial differences. A simple 1020 location could send officers scrambling in opposite directions. This wasn't just about different codes for the same thing. It was about local slang, regional expressions, all thrown into the mix. A perp in New York City might be a goon in Chicago or a bad guy in Texas. The result? A linguistic minefield where even the most experienced officers could get lost in translation. The true test of any communication system is how it performs under pressure. And when it came to large-scale incidents, the patchwork quilt of police codes unraveled spectacularly. Imagine a natural disaster, a terrorist attack, a major riot. Multiple agencies converge, all speaking their own coded language. Suddenly, 10-4 doesn't mean message received anymore. It means something different to the firefighters. And the paramedics? They're using a whole other set of codes. It's a cacophony of jargon, a recipe for confusion, delays, and potentially fatal mistakes. This wasn't just a hypothetical problem. The 9/11 Commission report, in its analysis of the emergency response, highlighted communication breakdowns as a major contributing factor. The report specifically cited the lack of interoperability between agencies with their different communication systems and codes as a critical weakness. Section 4. The cipher within the code, department-specific jargon. If you thought the regional variations were bad, wait till you hear about department-specific codes. These were the real gems, the codes within the codes. Developed by individual departments, often out of necessity or a desire for further secrecy, these codes were like something out of a spy thriller. Some departments developed codes for common occurrences, like Code Brown for a coffee break or Code Zebra for a particularly attractive suspect. Others created codes for sensitive operations, like undercover drug busts or surveillance details. The problem? These codes were rarely written down or shared outside the department. New recruits learned them through osmosis, often with hilarious and sometimes dangerous results. It created an insider-outsider dynamic, where even officers from neighboring jurisdictions were left in the dark. Section 5. The 10-code paradox. From clarity to confusion. The 10 codes were born out of a desire for clarity, a way to cut through the static and communicate effectively. But somewhere along the way, the system designed to simplify communication became a symbol of its breakdown. The proliferation of codes, the regional variations, the department-specific jargon, it all added up to a system on the verge of collapse. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The very codes meant to enhance communication were now hindering it. They were creating confusion, delaying responses, and putting lives at risk. The 10 codes, once hailed as a marvel of efficiency, had become a cautionary tale. Remember the biblical story of the Tower of Babel? People, united in their ambition, tried to build a tower to reach the heavens. But God decided to confuse their languages, throwing their grand plans into disarray. The proliferation of police codes? That was our Tower of Babel moment. The initial idea behind standardized codes was noble. Instead of one unified language, we ended up with a hodgepodge of dialects. They might as well be speaking different languages. The lack of universal standardization meant that even seasoned officers could find themselves lost in translation. A simple misunderstanding, a code misinterpreted, could have deadly consequences. Imagine this: a high-speed chase, adrenaline pumping, sirens wailing. The pursuing officer radios in 1032 requesting backup. Suspect is 1037 with a possible 1034. Now, imagine the dispatcher trying to relay that information to other units from different jurisdictions. Suddenly, the 1032 is mistaken for a 1033, flooding the airwaves with unnecessary traffic. The suspect uses the confusion to his advantage, slipping away while the officers are busy deciphering their own language. The tragic events of September 11, 2001 exposed the fatal flaws of our fragmented emergency communication system. The 9/11 Commission report highlighted communication breakdowns as a major contributing factor. First responders, brave men and women, were hampered by their inability to communicate effectively. The report called for a complete overhaul of emergency communication systems, urging for interoperability and plain language. The nation was forced to confront the deadly consequences of miscommunication. Section 4. The price of miscommunication. Real-world consequences. The problems with code-based communication weren't limited to hypothetical scenarios or high-profile tragedies. They played out every day, in communities across the country, often with devastating results. A domestic violence call, coded incorrectly, leading to a delayed response and a tragic outcome. A missing child report, lost in translation between agencies, costing precious time in the search. a routine traffic stop escalating into a violent confrontation because of a misunderstood code phrase. These incidents, while often overlooked in the grand scheme of things, highlighted the human cost of miscommunication. The families torn apart by preventable tragedies, the communities left reeling in the aftermath of avoidable disasters. The evidence was overwhelming. The system was broken. The reliance on codes, once seen as a necessary evil, had become an unacceptable risk. The time had come to ditch the jargon, embrace clarity, and prioritize a language that everyone, from seasoned officers to brand new recruits to the citizens they swore to protect, could understand. Section 1. The Walls Come Down. 9/11 and the Call for Clarity. The 9/11 attacks were a wake-up call for America, not just about terrorism, but also our own vulnerabilities. The 9/11 Commission report exposed a glaring weakness. Our emergency response communication was a mess, a jumble of incompatible systems and conflicting codes. It called for interoperable communications for seamless coordination. The report demanded a common language, especially when lives were on the line. Section 2. Homeland Security steps in. A unified approach to chaos. In the aftermath of 9/11, a new agency emerged on the scene, the Department of Homeland Security, DHS. Tasked with the monumental task of protecting the nation from future threats, DHS quickly realized that fixing our broken communication systems was paramount. DHS didn't just throw up their hands and say, well, this is complicated. They got to work, pushing for interoperability, standardization, and yes, plain language. They knew that relying on a patchwork of codes, varying from state to state, even department to department, was a recipe for disaster. This wasn't about erasing decades of tradition overnight. It was about recognizing that when lives are at stake, clarity trumps all. DHS recognized that the transition wouldn't be easy. Old habits die hard, especially in professions steeped in tradition. But the need for change was undeniable. Enter NIMS, the National Incident Management System. Don't worry, I'll spare you the full bureaucratic rundown. The important thing to remember is that NIMS is all about creating a standardized approach to incident management, regardless of the size or scope of the event. And guess what's a key part of that? You got it. Clear, concise communication. NIMS encourages, some would say mandates, the use of plain language in all incident communications. This means ditching the 10 codes, the signal codes, the department-specific jargon, and just speaking like normal human beings. Radical, right? Now, before you seasoned officers out there start clutching your code books in protest, hear me out. NIMS isn't about throwing the baby out with the bathwater. It recognizes that there are times when codes might be necessary for tactical operations or to protect sensitive information. But the default setting? Plain, clear English. So, what are the benefits of this radical shift to plain language? Well, for starters, it reduces confusion. When everyone is speaking the same language, there's less room for misinterpretation, fewer chances of a message getting lost in translation. This is especially critical in high-pressure situations where seconds count. Plain language also improves interoperability. Remember that word from the 9/11 Commission report? It means that different agencies can communicate and work together seamlessly. No more time wasted trying to decipher each other's codes. Just clear, concise communication that allows everyone to focus on the task at hand. And let's not forget the human element. In the midst of a crisis, the last thing anyone needs is to feel like they're talking to a robot or trying to crack a secret code. Plain language builds trust and understanding, both between first responders and the public they serve. Change is never easy. And in the world of law enforcement, where tradition runs deep and resistance to change is practically a badge of honor, the push for plain language was met with, shall we say, mixed reviews. Some officers, veterans of the 10-code era, saw it as an attack on their professionalism, a dumbing down of their specialized language. They argued that codes were efficient, that they provided a sense of security, that they were part of the fabric of police culture. Others worried about the loss of operational security. They feared that criminals, listening in on scanners, would now have a front-row seat to their every move. What was once shrouded in the mystery of codes would now be broadcast for the entire world to hear. The transition wouldn't be easy. It would require extensive training, a shift in mindset, and a willingness to embrace a new way of communicating. But the potential benefits, in terms of clarity, efficiency, and ultimately lives saved, were too great to ignore.
Let's face it, folks, change isn't everyone's cup of tea. And in the world of law enforcement, where tradition runs deep and seniority reigns supreme, asking officers to ditch their beloved codes was like asking them to trade their badges for bibs.
Imagine a grizzled old sergeant, 20 years on the force, every 10 code etched into his memory like a sacred mantra. He's seen it all, heard it all, and he's gotten the job done using the language he knows best. Now, some hotshot consultant from Washington is telling him to talk like a regular Joe? Yeah, good luck with that.
The resistance wasn't just about stubbornness, though that played a part. For many officers, the codes were more than just a communication tool. They were a badge of honor, a mark of their insider status, a way of separating the men and women in blue from the civilians they swore to protect. Switching to plain language felt like a demotion, a blurring of the lines between them and the outside world.
Switching to plain language wasn't as simple as flipping a switch. It required a massive cultural shift, starting with comprehensive training programs that could bring officers of all generations and experience levels up to speed. Imagine trying to teach a room full of cops, some who still remember rotary phones, how to communicate with the clarity and precision of a seasoned news anchor. Not exactly a walk in the park. The training had to go beyond just memorizing new phrases. It had to address the underlying reasons why officers relied so heavily on codes in the first place. It had to emphasize the importance of clear, concise communication, especially in high-pressure situations where lives were on the line. And perhaps most importantly, it had to acknowledge the concerns of those who were resistant to change, addressing their fears about operational security and the potential loss of efficiency. Balancing operational security and clarity was a major hurdle in the transition to plain language. Plain language made it easier for everyone, including criminals, to understand police actions. Imagine a suspect hearing, "We're setting up a perimeter around the bank. Suspect is armed and dangerous." But complex codes also had risks, like miscommunication and delays. The solution was finding a middle ground, using plain language with tactical secrecy when needed. Section 4. A gradual evolution bridging the communication gap. Let's be realistic, folks. Rome wasn't built in a day, and neither was a new system of police communication. The transition to plain language was always going to be a gradual process, with different agencies adopting it at their own pace and in their own way. Some departments, eager to embrace the future, jumped in headfirst, ditching their old code books and mandating plain language for all but the most sensitive operations. Others took a more cautious approach, gradually phasing in plain language while retaining certain codes for specific situations. And then there were those who dug in their heels, clinging to their beloved codes with the tenacity of a bulldog guarding a bone. For them, change would come slowly, if at all. This patchwork approach, while not ideal, was perhaps inevitable given the decentralized nature of law enforcement in America. The key was to ensure that everyone was moving in the right direction, towards a future where clear, concise communication became the norm, not the exception. Section 1. The Digital Dispatch. Gone are the days of crackling radios and cryptic codes. Today's police communication is a high-tech symphony of digital signals. Step into a modern dispatch center, and you'll feel like you've walked onto the set of a futuristic thriller. Dispatchers coordinate responses with the precision of air traffic controllers. Giant screens display real-time maps and streaming video feeds. The clunky radio consoles have been replaced by sleek, multifunctional workstations. Section 2. Plain talk, not code talk. The transition to plain language wasn't always smooth sailing, but the benefits of clear, concise communication quickly became apparent. Imagine a hostage situation unfolding. Every second counts. Now imagine the negotiator trying to coordinate with tactical teams using a hodgepodge of codes and jargon. Now imagine that same scenario with officers using plain language. Suspect is armed with a knife and holding a hostage. We need a clear shot from the south entrance. See the difference? Codes in the cloud technology and the future of communication. The evolution of police communication is far from over. As technology continues to advance at a dizzying pace, law enforcement agencies are constantly exploring new ways to connect, coordinate, and share information. Imagine a world where officers in the field can access the same real-time data as dispatchers, all at their fingertips. Body cameras stream live video feeds back to headquarters, providing commanders with a bird's-eye view of unfolding situations. Facial recognition software identifies suspects in crowds, and predictive policing algorithms anticipate criminal activity before it even occurs. This interconnectedness, while offering unprecedented opportunities for crime fighting, also raises important questions about privacy, surveillance, and the potential for misuse. As police communication becomes increasingly reliant on technology, striking a balance between security and civil liberties will be paramount. One thing is certain: the future of police communication will be shaped by innovation, driven by the need for speed, efficiency, and the ever-present challenge of staying one step ahead of the bad guys. Striking a balance, clarity, security, and the human element. The move towards plain language doesn't mean abandoning codes altogether. There are still situations where codes serve a valuable purpose, particularly in covert operations or when protecting sensitive information. Imagine undercover officers infiltrating a criminal organization. They need a way to communicate discreetly, without blowing their cover. Or consider a SWAT team preparing to execute a high-risk warrant. They might use codes to coordinate their movements and maintain tactical surprise. The key is finding the right balance between clarity and security. When lives are on the line, plain language should be the default. But when operational security demands a more discreet approach, codes still have their place. But technology alone can't solve all of law enforcement's communication challenges. The human element remains crucial. Officers need to be skilled communicators, able to de-escalate tense situations, build rapport with community members, and convey information in a way that is both clear and compassionate. The evolution continues. From the crackling static of early radio transmissions to the sleek digital interfaces of today's dispatch centers, the evolution of police communication has been marked by innovation, adaptation, and a constant striving for greater efficiency and effectiveness. The move towards plain language, while not without its challenges, has been a significant step forward, improving clarity, fostering interoperability, and promoting transparency. But the journey is far from over. As technology continues to evolve at an unprecedented pace, law enforcement agencies will face new challenges and opportunities in their quest to communicate effectively. The key will be to embrace innovation while remaining mindful of the human element, ensuring that communication remains a tool for building trust, fostering understanding, and ultimately, keeping our communities safe. The end of an era, static replaced by silence. For decades, the whirring hum of a police scanner was a siren song.
These weren't your average radio enthusiasts. These were the scanner buffs, the armchair detectives.
They lived for the adrenaline rush of a 1031 in progress, the feeling of being privy to a world hidden from ordinary ears.
The shift to plain language? Imagine tuning into your favorite police frequency only to be met with plain English.
They packed up their scanners, their trusty code books gathering dust. Decoding the digital age, new challenges for the Airwaves Aficionado. A new breed of enthusiast emerged, eager to embrace the digital age.
Technology silenced 10 codes but opened new possibilities.
Digital radio's encrypted channels seemed like a death knell. But where there's a barrier, there's someone breaking it.
Enter SDR, decoding a wide range of digital signals. The shift to plain language might have seemed like a buzzkill at first, but it forced scanner enthusiasts to become better listeners, to pay closer attention to the nuances of language. Imagine listening to a police chase in progress, the officers using plain language to describe the suspect's vehicle. This shift made the scanner hobby more accessible to newcomers. This led to a resurgence of interest in scanner listening.
Remember that mysterious world we talked about at the beginning? The one shrouded in static and 10 codes, accessible only to those in the know? Well, the walls have come down, folks. The once secret language of law enforcement has, for the most part, been deciphered, demystified, and replaced with something far more radical, plain English. This evolution wasn't about stripping away the mystique of police work. It was about recognizing that when lives are on the line, clarity trumps all. The days of officers from different agencies struggling to communicate during emergencies, their words lost in a fog of conflicting codes, are thankfully fading into the past. This shift towards transparency hasn't come without its critics. Some argue that it compromises operational security, giving criminals an ear into the inner workings of law enforcement. Others lament the loss of a certain romanticism, a bygone era when the airwaves crackled with a language only the initiated could understand. The evolution of police communication is a testament to the fact that even the most entrenched systems can change, must change, when the stakes are high enough. The push for plain language wasn't just about adopting a new vocabulary, it was about embracing a new mindset, one that prioritizes clarity, accountability, and the seamless flow of information. This shift has had a ripple effect far beyond the world of law enforcement. It's influenced how we communicate in emergency situations, how we train first responders, and how we think about the role of technology in public safety. But the story doesn't end there. As technology continues to evolve at a breakneck pace, we can expect even more dramatic changes in how we communicate in times of crisis. From artificial intelligence that can analyze data and predict criminal activity, to augmented reality systems that provide first responders with real-time information in the field, the possibilities are both exhilarating and daunting. So, the next time you're stuck in traffic, bored out of your mind, and tempted to tune into that old police scanner, remember this. The world you're listening to is a world in transition. The familiar symphony of 10 codes might be fading, but it's being replaced by a new language, one that's clearer, more efficient, and ultimately, more effective in keeping our communities safe. The airwaves are still alive with the stories of those who protect and serve, but the language they use is changing, reflecting a world where transparency, accountability, and the seamless flow of information are paramount. And who knows, maybe that's a good thing. After all, when it comes to public safety, the less mystery, the better. Stay tuned, folks. The future of communication is just a frequency